The Memorial Weekend of 1907 became a scene of unimaginable tragedy. The town of Elyria, Ohio witnessed a catastrophic inter-urban car collision of car 123 and car 129 at the intersection of 5th Street and Middle Avenue, leaving 8 people dead and 76 injured. Homer Edgar Allen was only 18 years old when he passed away from his injuries while standing on the crowded rear platform of streetcar 129. Despite being rushed to the hospital, his feet were amputated at the ankles and lay on the hospital floor due to a lack of medical provisions. Who could have thought that this tragedy would change the history of children throughout the United States and the world? This is a story of Edgar Fisk, Daddy Allen. Edgar Fisk Allen was born in Newton, Massachusetts on May 8th of 1862 and raised in a middle-class family. His father's business downfall during the financial crisis of 1873-76 and his grandfather's influence contributed to his determination of becoming a man of success.
The Allen family left New England in 1876 and settled in Cleveland, Ohio. Employed at the age of 16 by the W. Bingham Hardware Company, at age 26, Allen was able to invest all his savings to form the Cleveland Cedar Company. Although in competition with 2 large established lumber companies, Allen's company was awarded the entire cedar log contract from American Telephone and Telegraph, who would use his logs to string telegraph wires. This launched his successful business career. By 1907, Allen, now married and the father of 2 sons, semi-retired and moved his family to Elyria, Ohio.
Life appeared to be going well for the Allen family, but it was his son's misfortune that motivated him to envision a facility that could have potentially saved his son's life and the other passengers.
As a respected business person, he became involved with several community organizations. As a member of the Chamber of Commerce, there were discussions of the need for adequate medical facilities before his son's tragedy. At that time, Elyria had only a makeshift hospital staffed by a single nurse.
As a man of action, he worked with the Chamber of Commerce to plan for a new hospital. He sold his business and raised the necessary funds. On October 30th of 1908, the Elyria Memorial Hospital opened its doors with improved emergency services and better equipped facilities. Edgar Allen volunteered as a treasurer, giving him the opportunity to meet James Bodek, a physically challenged orphan boy who had been a victim of the polio disease. They became attached and Jimmy referred to him as Daddy Allen. As Allen followed his gradual progress, he wondered if there might be other disabled children in Elyria. In 1915, the Gates Hospital was inaugurated. Allen used his entrepreneurial spirit to determine the extent of children differently abled. He hired a social worker, Mrs. Van Ostren, to conduct a survey in Lorraine County. To his surprise, more than 250 children were identified with disability. In the meantime, he designated a ward at the Elyria Memorial Hospital specifically for them. Unable to comprehend why these children had no medical care, he then continued to survey Huron and Ashland counties. The number of disabled children went up to 700. Allen then decided to survey all of Cleveland and had a total of 2,000 disabled children under 16 years old. Over the next 3 years, he sought assistance from various organizations to raise funds for building the country's first facility of its kind, exclusively for the rehabilitation of the sick, crippled, and deformed children. On April 6th of 1915, the Gates Hospital opened its doors adjacent to the Elyria Memorial Hospital. After inaugurating the facility, an unexpected issue arises. Edgar Allen was unaware that facilities distrusted medical treatment from hospitals. The few patients they had indicated that it was not operating at its full capacity. One reason was that parents often kept their disabled children at home out of shame and embarrassment. Some families believed that their children were as God intended and didn't seek medical attention. Additionally, financial constraints were another problem. The children receiving care were mostly sent by Mrs. Fields, a member of the Women's Federated Clubs of Sandusky, who used Allen's surveys to contact the families. This allowed Allen to realize he was missing the human touch. In order to get these children treated, he needed local voluntary groups to provide community bonding.
He was on the forefront of actually wanting to help people, where before a lot of individuals either died from some of their disabilities or were hidden away in families. He started to make it more so people were used to seeing people with disabilities.
In 1918, Edgar Allen found genuine interest in helping disabled children through the newly chartered Rotary Club of Elyria. The members supported Allen's plan, and he continued to persuade neighboring Rotary clubs to form an organization that would consistently work in the disabled children's cause. In 1919, he founded the Ohio Society for Crippled Children and served as its president. He comprised members from Rotary clubs in Elyria, Cleveland, Sandusky, and Toledo. Their first order of business was to advocate for a state-funded program for children with disabilities, but with a decentralized healthcare approach. By establishing facilities close to communities, families of disabled children would have convenient access to these services, making them more likely to get them treated. However, achieving this required appropriate legislation. In 1921, the Ohio Plan went into effect. Edgar Allen and his associates began drafting House Bill 174 to establish a legislative fund program for medical treatment for disabled children. This would create a collaboration between the Department of Health and Welfare, which would manage the program, of the state of Ohio, which would finance it. Additionally, House Bill 200 would involve the Department of Education as a supervisor for providing special schools and classes for these children. In the spring of 1921, the bills were presented to the House and Senate. Although the bill passed its first reading, it became stalled in the committee. When Allen learned it might remain there, he immediately mobilized Rotary clubs across the state, urging their state representatives and senators to pass the legislation. In a matter of 3 days, they were removed from the committee and passed by the House and Senate with no dissenting votes. On May 18th of 1921, the governor signed it into law, reading to the development of orthopedic hospitals and clinics providing medical care throughout the state, and local rehabilitation homes and health department nurses with follow-up care. Edgar Allen didn't stop there. He made it his mission to expand the movement across the nation. He rallied members from organizations in Michigan, New York, Illinois, and Ohio, using the Ohio Plan as a model for other states. Together, they established the National Society for Crippled Children, now known as Easter Seals.
The local connection with Rotary turned national and then international as the operations of the Ohio Society became publicized in the official Rotary periodical and discussed at district and international level meetings. Allen served as president of the International Society for Crippled Children until 1934.
The International Society, formed a year after and replacing the National Society, successfully helped establish 23 affiliated societies in the country and Canada. Still, Allen continued to take on more responsibility because to him, the bigger the job, the broader the vision. Allen once recorded in his personal journal at the age of 62 that in a time period of 3 months, he traveled 6,900 miles, spoke at 27 Rotary meetings, met with members from 100 clubs, exchanged thousands of letters, and visited over 20 redeveloped homes and schools. In his spare time, he continued working and raising funds, setting a minimum standard, and always aiming for more, while always driven by his motto, "Keep on keeping on." During this time, representatives of the National Society worked with federal lawmakers to develop the first Social Security legislation, a program that would provide annual funding to states that submitted approved plans with services of locating disabled children, providing medical care, diagnostics facilities, hospitalization, and aftercare. In 1935, the Social Security Act was passed. By 1939, all states had submitted plans for services under the provisions of Title V, Part 2 of this act. Around this time, Allen's health had deteriorated and passed away on September 20th of 1937. The National Society carried forward Allen's legacy, and by 1950, then known as the Easter Seals Society, had affiliates in every state, the District of Columbia, and Puerto Rico. As Allen movement expanded, new organizations developed and the field of rehabilitation grew.
We were one of the pioneers, but, there are other services like ours, like there are, services that are specific to certain diagnoses, like you have your different autism services providers. United Cerebral Palsy is another one. Goodwill was founded in the same era as us as well, and they have some similar. There are some Goodwills and Easter Seals that are the same organization who merged together.
In 1973, they opened an office in Washington, D.C. to advocate for the passage of laws concerning the quality of life for people with disabilities. They worked on funding for independent living centers, advocating for building accessibility, ending discrimination for air passengers, as well as civil rights in the private sector through what we know today as the Americans with Disabilities Act.
and we had a long way to go, and we still have longer to go for people to have, equality and inclusion. But he helped start that momentum. And I think in the last probably 20 years, we've gained a lot more than I thought we would. And it's continuing. So I'm really happy with that. But I think he started that, hey, let's do something to get these kids back.
This was the work of the unsung hero with a magnificent obsession to transform the healthcare and education of children with disabilities in the United States. Let's remember Edgar Allen as a perfect example of a man who turned a tragic event into a source of strength to stand up for those who lack equal opportunities in life and change their world forever. His legacy serves as an inspiration for future generations as we are reminded to recognize and challenge injustices in all areas of life and become a voice of inclusion in our communities.